Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's Education, Elections, and Housing Committee meeting. It is Wednesday, February 24th. We are here today to discuss MC 2121, a bill that will establish a pilot program for school site councils. We had the bill hearing a couple of weeks ago in Montgomery County delegation, and we have a couple of people here from MCEA and a teacher as well. Heather Carroll Fisher is with MCEA. Danelia Wilson is a teacher at Wheaton Woods. She teaches first grade. And they are here to answer any questions we have about the bill, how it would operate, and why it might be necessary. So the bill was sponsored by Senator Waldstreicher, and Delegate Acevero submitted and circulated an amendment that he shared he would be able to join today to answer any questions about that amendment. Members, you received a copy of the amendment yesterday that was circulated by Rebecca. I'd like to just get started with a really basic question. I think we kind of covered it a bit during the Montgomery County delegation bill hearing, but I'd just love to hear a little bit more from either Ms. Carroll Fisher or Ms. Wilson. If you can share a bit about just why this bill is necessary and why it has to happen via legislation. I know this is something that's been discussed locally recently, and so just want to have an understanding about why a bill is required. And I'll also share, colleagues, for those of you who are wondering, we did invite MCPS to attend this morning's work session, but at the last minute, an emergency came up and they were unable to attend. So I just didn't want anyone to think that we did not include them. So Ms. Carroll Fisher, would you like to take that question, please?
Sure. Let me just repeat back to make sure I heard your question correctly. You're asking why we believe that this bill is necessary and why even handling it through legislation rather than efforts more at the school system level?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we did attempt to try to get something about school site councils adopted at the school system level through our negotiation, which would then make it school system policy. We were not able to make any progress with the school system through that avenue. So what we did was we decided to see if we could move it this way, because in fact, in all the research that we did around school site councils in any state that actually has them, it is through state legislation. We just had tried to do it through the school system level to see if we could make progress that way. So it's actually the norm that governs school site councils, or whatever they're called some different things in different states, but the body that is the school site council is actually governed by legislation in other states, which is why we took this avenue since we were unsuccessful the other way.
Okay, that's really helpful to understand. Thank you. Delegate Barbe.
Yeah, I probably should know the answer to this, and maybe it was in the testimony, but I can't remember. Is the county council able to do this legally? Have they attempted? Has that been attempted?
That's a good question. I don't know if they could or not, because like I said, since we couldn't get it done through our direct relationship with the school system, we decided to try to take the route where it's through state legislation everywhere else where it is implemented. So we didn't even attempt that approach.
So, Madam Chair, do you happen to know, I don't have any of the stuff in front of me, and again, I have to apologize. Do you happen to know if the county council and county executive have taken a position on this legislation?
So I think Kathleen's on from the county to provide info, but my understanding is they have not taken a position.
Well, it would really be nice if they did.
Right. Kathleen,
well, yeah, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, so they did not take a position at this stage because last time we formally discussed it, they had asked for input from MCPS, and so I mean, just perfectly honest, when you look at the bill, it's just really puzzling as to why a local bill on this topic is coming. And so both the county executive and council wanted to know more from MCPS. I was just looking in my email, Madam Chair, I don't know if you received it, but I do believe the Board of Education looked at this bill at its meeting last week. Did you get a response? I think I could dig it up in my email in terms of what the board said.
Yes, we did get a response, and I think it was circulated, right, Rebecca?
Okay.
I don't recall. I can look.
Yeah, I vaguely remember seeing an email about the board's opposition to it. Okay, Delegate Plakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And a question for either of our special guests today. So, I mean, MCPS has previously provided some information that they say they have basically an internal team that I think is called an instructional leadership team that they feel like meets the purposes of this bill. Are either of you familiar with that and might be able to provide some perspective on how that is the same or different from the legislation that's before us?
Sure. I can talk a little bit about that. So it is the instructional leadership team. It's we call the ILT for short. So the ILT is really insular. It doesn't provide parent or communities the opportunity for feedback, or even students in secondary. A site council, though, is more traditionally an open meeting where the school community can, watch the proceedings, but the ILT is really only open to staff. So only some staff are even permitted to participate. A lot of staff have to just observe if they want to come. And then in some schools where our administration's not as collaborative as others, that information is kind of like stored in secrecy or hoarded. And so the point of the site council is really to create a sunshine law that makes a transparent process regarding school budget and performance information. So in an ILT, the principal also has the choice to select who is, in an elementary school, the grade level team leader at each level. And so people who are likely to agree with the principal on all issues could be chosen. You could have kind of a stacked ILT, and those people are placed on leadership instead of really creating a space for shared leadership and ideas.
Thank you for that. And so just to briefly re-summarize it, just to make sure I have it clear. So with the ILT, that is an internal meeting. It's not a public meeting. The participants is limited to staff. There isn't parent or community involvement with that. And it's not, transparent in terms of that the public would be able to tune in and watch it. Is that
exactly?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Plakovich-Carr. Delegate Cullison, I think I saw your hand raised first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for being here. And you, Kathleen. So would there be anything prohibiting the ILC becoming this body? Becoming is there something that would prohibit a principal from asking parents to join the ILC and asking a student? And I guess I'm wondering, and I thought the contract had the at least one elected representative on the ILT. Is that correct? Is that still correct?
The elected faculty representative and the elected support representative.
Okay, so it's not totally principal. I mean, the majority of it is principal appointed, but at least there are two elected representatives from the staff. So my question though is would there be anything that would stop a principal from inviting, that wanted to, and that had the support of staff, and even making those meetings public?
As far as I know, there's nothing limiting that. I don't know for sure, but it would, the true nature of the school site council is to create a body that is not beholden to or has any sort of relationship that can be misconstrued as a supervisor and supervisee. That creates a power dynamic that may limit honesty and true collaboration and honest feedback. In the ILT, the power dynamic will always exist, that the principal is the supervisor of everybody sitting on the ILT, including the EFR and the ESR. The head building rep, who would serve in a labor management capacity, does not sit on the ILT, and they would have a true labor management relationship. And it's true that a parent is often invited to participate in the ILT when they are doing the SIP, the student improvement plan. Danelia, is that what it's called? But that's just whoever the handpicked person is that the principal selects. I think it just varies by school. So again, the point of the school site council is to create a body that does not have those power dynamics in place or the supervisorial dynamics in place, and that the people sitting on the school site council are elected by their constituencies for all the parties, including the parents.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Delegate Collison. Vice Chair Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for coming this morning. I just have a couple of questions for our, as Delegate Plakovich dubbed you all, our special guests. So first, I think it's on page 3 of the bill, it mentions that a school site council shall oversee the implementation of 25 school-specific blueprint for Maryland's future grants. Could y'all just walk us through what that looks like in practice? Like what part of the blueprint funding do y'all think is most well suited for sort of a school specific site analysis?
Do you want to start with that one? Or
Sure, I can start. Really what we're interested in are school level funds. Grant money could be earmarked for a school directly, like for community schools through the concentration of poverty grant, or indirectly, like for the funding for special education or, English language learners. For any of these types of grant dollars, once the money makes its way to the individual school budget, the school site council really would have an oversight and be part of the decision-making process on how to spend the allocated funds, unless it's limited by statute elsewhere.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I guess my follow-up is, I think that there's probably members of the committee that understand this better than me, certainly Delegate Collison. What is the current process for budgetary oversight at the school level?
So there currently is no public oversight. The only accountability exists through traditional management hierarchy.
Okay, that's it, Madam Chair, thank you.
I will say that we were successful in our most recent bargain where we're about to sign off on our contract to actually finally get some language that says the school resource budget around supplies will now actually have to be shared with the ILT so that they can at least see how much money has been allotted to the school. And they could make recommendations to the principal, but there's no real shared decision-making there. But actually, it's the most transparent language we have now around anything related to the budget at a school level is around instructional materials. But that's brand new language we just won in our contract and hasn't been implemented yet. But otherwise, it's like Danelia said, there's no transparency at all. And just to add, one of the reasons why we were thinking this would be a good idea is, as most of you probably know, in the new ESSA law, this per pupil student expenditures will have to be published on the school's websites and shared publicly. And those numbers can be really misleading if people don't understand exactly what goes into the per pupil spending by school. And so one of the thoughts we had was, well, if the public could also see what are the dollars being spent at the school and how are they being spent, it would offer additional context and information for the average citizen who's looking at a school's website and seeing, oh, well, my school spends X dollars per student. And then they can make up their own story if there wasn't context. But if there is context that says, okay, and there are public meetings that say, here's the budget for this school, here's how that money is spent, then it would create more transparency, more information, more context, and therefore would help people understand better what that per pupil spending number is that now is required by law to be published for each school.
Okay, thank you. Before I turn back to our members for questions, I want to take a moment to recognize Delegate Acevero, who has proposed an amendment which was circulated to members. And I just want to take a moment to allow him to discuss or explain the amendment as well. So Delegate.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. As was stated, I submitted an amendment. It's a mix of technical, clarifying, but also I would describe it as a conformity amendment to ensure that these definitions, the analysis, et cetera, conforms with the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. You should have received a copy of it, but in essence, what it does on page 2 after line 4 is sort of define teacher and community school to mirror the definitions in the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. It also makes another change around the findings from school assessment. So in other words, instead of including analysis, rather the findings from a school assessment. It also strikes that the county board may determine the extent to which the needs assessment applies to the needs of the schools. It's a bit of technical and a bit of conformity, but just wanted to ensure that the bill that we're considering right now also aligns with the larger piece of legislation that we passed, the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. So I would ask that you favorably consider it, and hopefully we can incorporate it in the bill so we can ultimately have an even stronger bill that gets to the heart of what Danelia and Heather and others have shared, which is, we want greater community participation and oversight and accountability. With that, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Okay, so we'll invite members of the committee who have questions, either of our special guests or of Delegate Estivero on the amendment. So now I'll turn back to Delegate Barve for question.
Well, my question wasn't on the amendment. It was
That's okay. It doesn't have to be. Go ahead.
So, forgive me, but someone described to me the problem that we're attempting to solve here. I know that principals may make a bad decision every now and again because all people do, but is this a gigantic problem right now?
I'll turn to either of our special guests if they'd like to speak to that, as they have more.
Okay. Yeah.
Ms.
I guess that depends on who you ask and how you define gigantic problem. I mean that with sincerity, because for us, we do believe that it's a problem that the only people who understand how budget resources that have been allocated to a school are being spent are not the people who are impacted by those decisions. And so for us, that is a big problem. Now, MCPS or someone else may say that's not a big problem. So you probably would get a different response from them. So I understand that our answer is biased based on what our interests are. And our interests are that public tax dollars being spent to address concerns, needs for students, families, is something that people should know about and understand how, why, etc. And so unless I'm not really understanding your question,
well, maybe I should explain my question a little more. Typically right now, the administrator of the funds for a school is the principal, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so he or she would have to produce a budget of some sort right now and probably run it by the school board, right?
They're not by the school board. The school board, I mean, they're so far removed.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I meant the superintendent.
Even there, it's far removed. It's more through they have directors, and then the directors have associate superintendents. Things get, Danelia, I mean, unless you have more information to share around that.
My point is that right now, the way it works is the principal establishes what her or his budget would be for a year, and they run it up the flagpole to some. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
So this body that would be contemplated by this bill, is the intention to run the budget past them for their approval, or would they just have the ability to veto an individual decision by the principal?
Would the school site council have the ability to veto? Well, the administrator would be part of the school site council, and then depending on the way that we were looking at it. There's different models. We looked at different models around
So
the country.
The bill doesn't specifically say what the powers of the site council would be.
Yeah, in this particular model, the principal would be on the site council helping shape the budget.
Does this bill say what their powers would be specifically, or does it leave it up to someone else to decide that?
I have to look at it.
Let me tell you what my concern is. My concern is this. If I'm in charge of a budget, I don't know that I would want somebody plucking one decision out of 15 or 20 decisions and then saying, yeah, let's redo that. Okay, so Principal Barve, you decided to put $2,000 in category A, and we think it should only be $1,000, and the other $1,000 should be in category B. So that is it your intention to allow this body to be able to engage in that kind of management?
Our intention is that this body would look at school performance data, identify the needs that are there in order to move a school from point A to point B, and then think together how to use the resources given to them to move from point A to point B, that they would do that together. That's our intent.
So they do have the ability to override the budgetary decisions of the principal.
At this point, it's not written into the bill, as you said. So I don't.
If I may, on page 3 of the bill, lines 24 and 25, it specifies that the school site council shall oversee the implementation of school-specific blueprint for Maryland's future grants.
So what does oversee mean? Does that mean?
It's unclear whether they would just be part of the like receiving information about what the grants would be funding, or if they are actually making a determination on how the dollars would be spent.
I'm not a big fan of having committees veto individual decisions of decision makers. And the reason I'm not is, in my experience in government and in business, when you do that, the decision maker stops being, at some point, the decision maker stops being a decision maker, and a bureaucratic process is established where if I'm the principal and my last 3 controversial decisions were overturned, I'm just not going to make any decisions anymore. I'm just going to go straight to the body that overturned my decision and say, hey, is this okay with you? And maybe that's okay, maybe it's not okay. In my experience, it's better to let a decision maker make decisions and then make a decision to remove or replace them. I don't know. Okay.
I want to speak to your example for a second, though, where you said, well, can the group look and say there's $2,000 for this item at A, and then maybe we should move $1,000 to B. I think that's kind of the exact point of the bill, is this idea that discussion should be happening. It may not be an override, but it could be very much something that the principal didn't think about or didn't see. And so it could be that just didn't even occur. And so that discussion, that shared decision making, really could strengthen the budget and provide kind of, a more even playing field for students, and something that just was missed. So I think that example actually really highlighted kind of the points that we're thinking about in terms of shared decision making.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Boucher, are you seeking to provide clarification or answer to Delegate Barve's question?
Well, Madam Chair, thank you. I'll just be quick. It also goes back to Delegate Barve's question at the beginning. And I'll just wanted to share, as I listened to the discussion, and also that because MCPS isn't here as well, as I said, the council and county executive both wanted to know the board's position. And I just wanted to share with you, not to presume that, what your committee will do next, but I will share that it does appear to me that I believe the council and county executive would likely want to take a position on this, that we, now that we have the board's position and input, and I'll just defer to you that there is no position yet, but this is an issue that I know the County Executive Council would want to know the MCPS position and the advocate's position, and at least have an opportunity for to share their input to you. But I just wanted to share that.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Palakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Continuing to drill down on this budget issue. So my son's a kindergartner in an MCPS school that has a French immersion program at it. And I'll say, we haven't been in the school for very long, but my sense is from other parents and just kind of longstanding concerns about kind of equity between the French immersion program versus the regular class. My son's in the normal English classes. Would a bill like this provide some transparency and perhaps assurance to parents about that and about how resources are being allocated within a school? Because there are very different demographics amongst the students who are in the French immersion program versus the traditional classes. It is higher socioeconomic status, larger percentage white students, et cetera, in the French immersion class. Would this legislation actually help to address some of those equity concerns and either prove that there aren't any, or perhaps shed light on that and help us actually to address socioeconomic and perhaps racial gaps within a particular school?
That is the intent. That's the interest we have. Whether or not the bill as written accomplishes that goal, I think we could all dissect it and debate whether or not it achieves that goal. But that is one of our key interests for this legislation, is that it would create a space for the community of parents and staff to understand what dollars are coming into a school and how those dollars are being spent, creating more transparency and associating those dollars with the ESSA's required per pupil student expenditure by school being published. And there are concerns that that number is going to demonstrate inequity when it does start getting published on the school's websites. So it would be helpful for the community to understand what dollars are going into those numbers, what resources, et cetera.
Thank you.
I apologize, took me a second to find the unmute. Delegate Cullison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Although I just wanted to speak a little bit to Delegate Palakovich-Carr's comment about the French immersion program. That's a decision that's made on a county level, not a school level. So if the county wants to have a French immersion program, they'll go to a school and say, do you want to have it here? There are significant equity issues around those specialized programs. I mean, all of them throughout the county. So yeah, I think, something like this would definitely bring out the equity issues. The challenge is going to be, there is a lot more money in Title I schools than there is in not Title I schools. And there's a reason for that, right? There's equitable reasons for that. So it would be, again, I think the school site councils would have to be aware of how we deal with equity on a county level, I guess, in terms of how they deal with their own individual budgets, because it's the differential funding among schools is theoretically based on equity issues. If it's not, well, then we need to call it out. But because I know that's something that we did back in the early 2000s, is we actually put more county funds into high need schools, not just Title I funds, because prior to that it had been just Title I funds. So I think what I'm hearing clearly is there's an interest in knowing how local school budgets are created and created and implemented, and how the input is put in. So I guess I'm wondering, because I guess I thought that was a role that the ILT played. And if there was a way if the ILT is playing a role in the budget, the local school development, budget development, could we just talk about how to make that public, how to make that more transparent?
The ILT does not talk about the budget. As I mentioned earlier, there is the language we just won that the instructional materials budget will now be shared with the ILT per our contract. But nothing else is required to be shared with the ILT. And then again, just to reiterate, our interest is that the body that does have the opportunity to discuss the budget is doing it in a way that there's not a supervisorial relationship in the process, which could impede people feeling free to be honest or share thoughts depending on what their relationship is with their administration.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there further questions from members of the committee, either on the bill, the amendment, or questions to our special guests? Okay, so seeing none, I think we need a little bit of time to digest some of the information that was shared with us today. I had not really intended for us to vote on this bill today. But I just want to kind of give members an opportunity to think on the information that we heard and learned, as well as, for us to connect and read for everyone's edification, the Montgomery County Board of Education. They circulated to us, I believe, all of their legislative positions on all of their bills, which included this one. And that was on February 10th. So Rebecca kindly recirculated that document to us, so it should be at the top of your inbox this morning. And I believe that the county likely has received that as well, but if you've not, we can share it with you too, Kathleen. So, I thank you all so much for this productive discussion, and I want to thank Ms. Wilson for taking time out of her teaching day, as well as Ms. Carol Fisher for taking time out of your day to provide some really helpful feedback. Thank you, Delegate Estevero, for your helpful amendment and for coming to join us this morning. Delegate Estevero again was with us in Judiciary till late last night, and so really appreciate.
Always fun to be with you all in Judiciary.
That's right. We always have fun inviting you there. So
I'm waiting for my official debut before Environment and Transportation.
Oh, we will be so much nicer.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Delegate.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, colleagues. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all shortly. Thank you.
Bye.